All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Madison Board of Selectmen to order on February 26, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. Please join me in saluting the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record show all selectmen are present. Consent agenda, warrant dated number 23, 2/12/18, payroll registered number 7, dated 2/15/18, and number 8, 2/22/18.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the warrant and payroll registers as read. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I have an addition to the agenda tonight. We have 2 liquor license requests from Avalon Enterprises, which is Somerset Abbey. One is a regular extension of their normal liquor license, and the second one is to have a liquor license outside like they did last summer for tent events.
All right, so we have the regular liquor license for Avalon Enterprises, doing business at Somerset Abbey, and we have their extension of their outdoor liquor license.
Move to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve both requests. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. All right, discuss acceptance of the meeting minutes of February 12th, 2018.
Move to second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes of February 12th, 2018. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Old business, Mr. Moody?
No good,
Mr. Elias?
Not for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Horton?
None tonight.
Mr. Duchamp? None tonight. Not for me either. So, item of communication, Mr. Town Manager?
Let me ask our treasurer and clerk a question before I start. We have a number of things to sign. Are you okay with blue ink?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you don't allow any blue ink pens in the town office, so.
I don't.
I just haven't noticed all the blue ink pens up here.
I can black hat it.
Okay.
We have another number of items that need your signatures tonight. We have offered a temporary position as an alternate code enforcement officer starting Monday for Susan Hathaway. As such, the board would need to make the necessary appointments tonight, so I need the board to make motions, and they need to be 3 separate motions. The first would be to appoint Susan as an alternate code enforcement officer.
All right.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to appoint Susan Hathaway as the alternate code enforcement officer for the town of Madison. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
Secondly, we need a motion to appoint Susan Hathaway as the alternate plumbing inspector.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Susan Hathaway as the alternate plumbing inspector for the town of Madison. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. And third one.
And finally, we need a motion to appoint her as the alternate health officer.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to appoint Susan Hathaway as alternate health officer for the town of Madison. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. While you're signing, I wanted to update the board on the progress of cleanup at 21 and 25 Naomi Avenue. As you recall, at the last selectmen's meeting, the board directed me to hire a contractor to clean up the remaining debris from the houses that were in certain stages of demolition. They had passed, the deadline had passed for them to get that done. I was out there today, but before I get to that, I'll tell you what we did last week, because I want the board and residents to understand that we've been working on this nearly every day with stops and starts. I did contract with Jeff Lloyd to do the work out there. He actually took it upon himself to go speak to the individual that has a camper, has been living in a camper at 21 Naomi Avenue, because he wanted that camper to be moved off the lot before he came in with heavy equipment to do the work. He told her what the town had sent as far as the notice, that this work would be beginning soon. She informed him that she would not be moving the camper under any circumstances. So I talked with Sheriff Lancaster, and he talked with the district attorney, and because the town of Madison does not own the land, and because the individual that does own the land doesn't really care whether she's there or not, there's really no police action that the town could take to remove that camper from the premises. So the DA recommended to the sheriff, who recommended to me, that we talk with a lawyer and draft a letter to say that the town or M.L. Lloyd is not going to be held liable for any damage to the personal property that's on that lot. Talked with Ken Lexier today. He referred me to state statute, Title 30A, Section 3106, disposition of personal property. And he advised that we go by the letter of the statute, which is to give them 21 days notice to remove it. So now we're pushing that date further back to about the week of the 26th of March. So those letters that gave them 21 days notice were in the mail today. And in fact, I hand-delivered one out to Naomi this afternoon. The person wasn't at home, but I left it in the door. So I sent pictures from about 4:30 this afternoon to give you an idea of the progress or lack thereof. Of the two lots, obviously 21 is the one that has the most concern, because that person's living there. They're living there in a camper that, back in the fall, our code enforcement officer, Bob Dumpy, told them they needed a permit if they were gonna live in that camper on that lot. They never got that permit. There's questions as to the validity of the septic field that's there. So now that we have a new code enforcement officer that's been authorized to do so, next week we will go out there, talk about the fact that they're living there without a permit and that that septic field needs to be inspected. But even if we get to that point, I'm not sure how much more legal action we have to take to actually get that camper off that site. So that's where we are as of this afternoon. And I tried to send, I didn't have time to print pictures, so I tried to text pictures to those of you who had smartphones, and if you had a phone that was built in the Reagan administration, probably didn't get to notice.
Mr. Moody?
After the 21 days notice,
Right.
then what can we do?
Then Jeff Lloyd can proceed without the fear of liability,
Okay,
while that camper's still there. It does make it awkward, because there's a lot of work to be done, and that camper kind of encompasses the whole lot. Okay, other items of communication. The school board has set dates for their budget process. Monday, April 30th will be the school's informational meeting at the junior high. Monday, May 7th will be the validation meeting at the junior high. And then Tuesday, May 15th will be the referendum vote. I just wanted to let the board know that I plan to be out of town that week, the week of April 30th through May 7th. I'll be down in Georgia picking up my daughter. And I plan on being back on the 7th. Kathy, as the town clerk, is trying to get things ready for the referendum vote. She needs to have the school board signatures and the board of selectmen's signatures on the warrant in order for there to be a referendum vote, and she has to post that 7 days ahead. So what I would suggest is, if it's okay with the board, if the selectmen had a meeting Monday night, the 7th, after the validation meeting at the junior high, we could accomplish that, plus any other pieces of work that the selectmen needed to do that night. So that's my recommendation for that night, the 7th. There's a letter in your packet. Barbara Santiago has let the People Who Care Food Cupboard Board know that 2018 will be her last year as the director. So that board is now tasked with finding a new director before the end of December this year. Let's see, I've got a couple other things here. The Westernset Arts Council has asked that municipalities support the Somerset County Rural Cultural Plan, which I have a copy of here if you'd love to look at it, which I'm sure you will in your spare time. However, I would recommend that our board recommend or support this cultural plan. I sat in on several of these board meetings while they were working on it. It represents the art and culture parts of our county. It also represents our farmers. It represents the farm-to-table farmers market movement. So there's really a good collaboration of people, and the West Runset Arts Council, along with Main Street Skowhegan, have really spearheaded this, and Christina Cannon's done a lot of good work getting a lot of this done. So I would entertain if the board wanted to make a motion to support the Somerset County Rural Cultural Plan.
What does support mean?
Nothing financial. It means that you sign this letter saying we think it's a good idea.
That's all?
That's all.
What do you vote? So moved. Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to support the Somerset County Rural Cultural Plan. Any questions, any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
Thank you. Just a couple of more things. In the process of doing some other work, I found that there are 3 town ordinances that currently relate to local parks. And the list of local parks in those ordinances needs to be updated because there's 2 or 3 new parks that aren't on there. So I just bring this to the board's attention. You may see this at a future meeting as you do the workshop and public hearing to update this, to try to get it ready for town meeting in June. And finally, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we had a leak here in the building during the last quarter that generated a $1,700 water bill. The board of directors for the Anson Madison Sanitary District were able to give us a $750 abatement on that bill, so that did reduce it almost by half. And that's all I have.
Thank you. All right, this time in a new business, I'd like to open the public hearing to discuss proposed changes to the animal ordinance, chapter 148. Public hearing is open.
This document, and I made some copies, it looks like several people were able to pick them up. This document is the same document that the board reviewed in their workshop at the last meeting pertaining to the animal ordinance. Like I had mentioned at the last meeting, the additions are some information specific to barking dogs, and then all of Article 2 specific to the keeping of animals not dogs or cats, and that pertains to the amount of land that an individual would have to have if they wanted to keep farm animals, so to speak. So what I'm hoping for tonight is if the board is able to take comments. If there's no needed changes to what's written, I'd need a motion after the public hearing to recommend that this go to town meeting.
All right, any questions on chapter 148? Which I believe is entitled the animal ordinance. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing no questions, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept as written.
And take the town meeting.
Yep. Sure.
I'm sorry. All right, a motion and a second to take chapter 148, the animal ordinance, to town meeting. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, motion carries. Number 2, discuss proposed changes to the cemetery ordinance.
So last meeting was the public hearing for the proposed changes to the cemetery ordinance, and those changes were accepted with the exception of page 4, which is item 26.5C. Originally, the wording was, no objects such as benches, seats, and fences shall be erected in this cemetery. And there are some members of the board and members of the public that questioned that. So we have worked the language to say this: no objects such as benches, seats, fences, etc. shall be erected without a complete base that keeps grass or weeds from growing underneath. Then one more sentence: location of such objects must be approved by the town sexton. How do you like that?
I like that. Nobody likes my bench. All right, so I get a motion to accept the
So what we are looking at
chapter
for
26.
chapter 26 is a motion to accept and to send to town.
And this one.
Make a motion to accept and send to town meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the chapter 26 cemeteries and send it to town meeting. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
While we're on the topic of cemeteries, does the board wish to take any action on setting cemetery charges for purchases of graves tonight, or do they want to do that at a different meeting? What's the feeling of the board? At the last meeting, it was presented a change for a $250 per grave fee to increase that to a $400 per grave fee. Is that something the board wants to entertain or discuss tonight, or take further?
We did it over with.
What's the recommendations on that?
Well, simply the recommendation, this is the original language. The recommendation would be to change all this and eliminate all this language and simply have a $400 per grave. So if you have a 2-grave lot, it would be $800, 3 graves, so on and so forth. And to set a cremation sale fee of $400
Per plot.
per plot, which would contain 2
No,
cremations.
per plot, not grade. We're talking about a per plot price. You might have a 4-plot lot.
Okay, the language on here says 4-grave lot, 6-grave lot, doesn't say plot lot.
We're not doing that, though, are we? We're just gonna sell them by single. They want 4, they pay for it.
You have now exceeded my knowledge of cemetery plots.
Well, you've got all this language and you crossed it all out,
Plot, plot.
right? So you're just gonna do,
Tammy,
If
can
I
you help
want
these
four-
two guys?
if I want a 4-plot lot, I pay $1,600.
What is the difference between a plot and a grave?
A plot and a grave, they're just called plots.
So if I say grave and you say plot, we're talking about the same thing?
No, I don't think so.
Tammy, help.
We sell them in singles, in 2 grade lots, 3 grade lots.
Oh, you're calling them graves.
I do, sorry. Plot, lot, all
Maybe it's a
comes back to
process.
the same.
At least the rest of them.
All right, let's move along.
Keep it calm, Albert, okay? Keep them calm.
Okay, can we get a motion to accept the changes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to accept the changes for the per plot, plots at Forest Hills, per grave at Forest Hills Cemetery. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, motion carries.
Now just keep in mind, for the public and for Tammy's sake, these changes don't go into effect until July 1st. Okay. One more thing on cemeteries while we're here. So the work to change that and to take the charges out of the ordinance and the work to redo chapter 26 renders chapter 532 useless. So the final recommendation I would need from the board to take to town meeting is a proposal to eliminate chapter 532, which only dealt with the placement of stones and the fees. Now those two things have been dealt with separately.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to take to town meeting a proposal to eliminate chapter 532. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, motion passes.
So I would like to think, Mr. Chairman, that until town meeting,
All
the
right.
cemetery issue has been laid to rest.
All right, I don't have to get my bench too early.
You better get it before July 1, buddy.
I gotta get it before I gotta put up cement underneath it. All right, let's move on. Number 30, review foreclosed properties, quitclaim deeds.
So in your packets, I gave you some notes on several of the properties that have come into the town's possession because of lack of payments. I think those notes are pretty self-sufficient unless the board had any questions. You'll note that the section is split into two: properties that have already come into our possession, and then 3 properties that will foreclose if the taxes aren't paid by March 14th. The reason those have a different date is because the tax collector back in 2016 made a mistake. And he was new at the job and hadn't had all of his training yet, but Kathy has graciously fixed his mistakes from 2 years ago. So, from this list, I would anticipate 5 properties from here going to auction in the spring. And if the board so chose, they could add 51 John Street and 5 Locust Street to those properties, so you could have an auction of 7 properties. I'm glad to say that we did get in touch with somebody about 122 Old Point, and so we're in the process of collecting the 15 taxes on that. That'll take it out of foreclosure. So did the board have any questions about this list?
All right, thank you.
While we're here, we have a number of quitclaim deeds because there have been payments. So we have 4 quitclaim deeds tonight. 2 of them have to do with tax payments. 1 of them have to do with the sale of land on Sugarloaf Lane the board approved at the last meeting. And the other one has to do with an old lien that was left on the property from several years ago. So the first would be a quitclaim deed for Robert LeBlanc for 41 Hardy Street in Madison. This is a back taxes that have been paid.
All right, looking for a motion?
So moved. Second.
A motion to issue a quitclaim deed to Robert M. LeBlanc for 41 Hardy Street. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. All right.
So the second one would be for Sandra Larley, and the property is at 96 Nichols Street.
Yep. All right, looking for a motion.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to issue a quitclaim deed to Sandra J. Lally at 96 Nichols Street. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
The third one is for a quitclaim deed to Brian Kenyon, and this is for the property at Sugarloaf Lane.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second to issue a quitclaim deed to Brian Kenyon for the lot at Sugarloaf Lane. Any questions? All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. And we have one more.
And the last one, and this is to clean up an old deed, so we would need a quitclaim deed to Kevin McCarty and Doreen Pinkham for the address at 1229 Lakewood Road.
So moved. Second.
All right, I have a quitclaim deed for, motion and a second for a quitclaim deed for Kevin R. McCarty and Doreen S. Pinkham for 1229 Lakewood Road. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move into number 4, the review of proposed fiscal year 2019 municipal budget with members of the advisory board.
Again, I'd like to thank several of the members that came out tonight, along with the department heads and Tammy Carrier who worked to put this together. I think, I see everybody's taken a packet, so hopefully everybody can follow along here. I'm on the front page of the budget packet where I'm looking at some budget considerations. First off, our valuation has now been consistently settled at $350 million for those who have been following this for years. Back in 2013, that was $500 million, so that's a difference of $150 million in valuation. So the reason I bring that out is, if you like doing simple math, the simple math is this. If you have a valuation of $350 million and you want a tax rate of 20, you take 35 times 2, that gives you 7. So that's $7 million that you have to raise in taxes to have a tax rate or a mill rate of 20. The county has been under $1 million for the last couple of years. It's probably going to be around $890,000. Our municipal budget, as presented right now with capital, is about $3 million. And the school budget from last year was about $5 million. So you've got 3 million plus 1 million plus 5 million, that tells you got $9 million you've got to find the money for, and a 20 mill rate's only going to raise you $7 million. You'll probably have $1 million to put back against the budget from revenues. So you're really looking at about $1 million that you'll have to raise from taxation to be able to fund all 3 of those school, county, and municipal budgets. So that being said, I wanted the department heads to put together their budget and let you know what they think needs to be done. But keeping in mind, we don't know where the county's gonna land yet, and the school has just started. So we're all kind of getting into this together. I know that this board has made it very clear that it's always important to know what the impact to the mill rate's going to be. But it's really simple math. With a valuation of 350, you're gonna have to have a mill rate higher than 20 to pay for all the things that need to get paid for. Revenue sharing, we haven't got the projections for 19 yet. Our current number is just under 300,000. We anticipate that to stay the same. Homestead exemption, the good news is it's kind of stayed at $20,000. It's not going up, which costs the town money, even though it helps the taxpayer. And municipalities are supposed to get about 12.5% more from the state this year. That should result in about $60,000 in additional revenue. So, aid to education funding. Everybody remembers the phrase 3-year rolling average. If you didn't hear 3-year rolling average over the last 3 years, you probably have missed out on all these exciting budget meetings. But when Madison lost their valuation in 2014, the state didn't recognize it with school funding because it based it on a 3-year rolling average, which meant our school funding was based on the fact that even though our valuation was only 350, the state thought it was 500, the state thought it was 500, the state thought it was 450, the state thought it was 400, and hopefully by next year it would come down to 350. Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is, in the current budget before the state right now, they got rid of the 3-year rolling average and went back to a 2-year average, which means we catch up this year. So the money that we'll receive from the state this year is based on Madison's valuation being at $350 million, which is good, where we want it to be. It doesn't mean, however, that the school is going to have a whole lot more money to work with. Because in this current budget right now that the school board passed last year, they used the $585,000 that we got as special legislation from the state a couple of years ago, which makes up the difference. So right now, based on my guesstimates and calculations, the school's gonna have just about the same amount of money from the state this year as they did last year. So for them to be able to say, oh, we'll be able to give back $300,000 or $400,000 to the taxpayer, I don't see that as likely. I see it as likely that the school board will work to try to keep it as flat a budget as they possibly can. County budget, the last couple of years, the county commissioners have been committed to a 2% increase, and that's it. So if they did a 2% increase this year, the town portion would remain around $890,000. So those are just the big picture items. What the board is reviewing tonight is the initial budget as proposed by the department heads. What's in this budget right now is a non-capital spending increase of about $160,000. And that's a 6% increase. Now, that's not capital, I'll get to capital in a minute. So non-capital spending, that's for pay, for equipment, that maintenance and repairs and water bills and all that stuff. That's about a 6% increase in this proposed budget. So of that 160, almost half of it comes from the increases from the water and sanitary districts. So the sanitary district is asking the taxpayers to pay $85,000 for storm drains this year, and the water district is increasing what the taxpayers pay for fire protection or hydrants. They've increased that by $30,000 up to a total of $225,000. Another big change that we've recommended is to restructure our code enforcement budget. In all likelihood, our code enforcement officer, who's been with us for 12 years, will no longer be with us next year. We're transitioning that budget. We've added some other lines such as legal to help with the enforcement of property maintenance. So we've recommended an $11,750 increase in the code enforcement budget. And some of the other increases will come from Public Works and Highway, and Glenn will be able to talk to you specifically about that. So that's just non-capital. The proposed capital spending is about $333,000. That's to do roads, that's to put money towards purchasing of equipment. That includes, it's primarily through the highway, but there's also a few $1,000s that Don has put into his fire budget for capital. So the town spent, this is where it gets confusing, the town is in the process of spending $202,000 for capital projects in this budget. We did some paving last year, we spent $202,000. None of that $202,000 was raised from taxation. All of it was carried forward from previous budgets, with $175,000 of it carried forward from a set aside for Heald Street that was done back in 2014. So to go from, you're not really going from 202 to 333, you're going from 0 to 333 to the taxpayer. So that proposed total increase would mean $493,000, a 19% increase. Assuming the school and the county budgets come flat and the valuation remains the same, that would result in an estimated mill rate increase of about $1.41 per thousand. Which means right now your mill rate is $21.50. At this rate, if the school and county stay the same, your mill rate would be close to 23. So that's trying, I know it's not a pretty picture, but it's a picture that I wanted the board and members of the public to understand as we move into this. Make sure everybody understands, there's no decisions being made tonight. April 4th, which is a Wednesday, is the scheduled budget meeting where the advisory board meets as a board, and they discuss the budget and make votes to take to town meeting. So that's coming up April 4th. So that's a little over a month from today. The next 2 pages in your packet are these summary pages. I'd like to just skip over those for now. We can come back to them. The department heads are here, and I'd like them to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about their budget and ask or answer any questions directly from the board. Julie is here, and so I have library scheduled to go first. If you're not, I'm sorry.
A couple of questions before we move off of this page.
Okay, sorry.
You did not mention the potential of abatements, and you did not mention anything about how much of that number of 493 can be offset with TIF fund.
From what I've looked at, none of that 493 can be offset with TIF funds. So that would be a direct cost to the taxpayer. Anything that we can use TIF money for, I've already tried to allocate in other ways. I wasn't prepared to discuss those details tonight, but that 493 is, none of it can come from TIF.
If I remember correctly, with the benefit of TIF last year, we had to raise about $2.2 million. Is that right? My memory's getting old.
what the municipal budget was
Yeah.
last year? I think it's on this yellow sheet here. The municipal budget that we're in right now is 2.584. We applied 250,000 from TIF, so 2,334, 2,334,000 is what we raised from taxation with the budget you're in right now.
And you're saying the new one's going to be 3 million?
3 million, now, see that little red line that has, oh, yours in color? Okay. That red line, red parentheses that has the 250,000 from TIF?
Yeah.
There will be some, it won't exceed that number of 250, but it won't be below 220. So somewhere in that range, once we calculate all the changes, you'll be able to apply a couple $100,000 from TIF. But that capital line of 333,000, that's all taxpayer driven. Now, Mr. Fort, you also mentioned the tax abatements, and I appreciate you bringing that up, just so the public knows that we are currently still in a legal battle with the former Madison paper. They've asked for nearly $1 million worth of their taxes back. We've been fighting that for over 1.5 years. Madison paper sold their property to two different entities, Somerset Acquisitions and Eagle Creek. Somerset Acquisition owns what is known as the Upper Mill. Somerset Acquisitions last year came and filed a tax abatement. They're asking for about $75,000 worth of their taxes back. Eagle Creek owns the hydros, which the town of Madison assessed around $50 million. We're waiting because the deadline to file abatements is Friday this week. Anson received an abatement request from Eagle Creek. The town of Jay received an abatement request from Eagle Creek. So we think it's a matter of just days before we get an abatement request from Eagle Creek. What that does is it casts a very frustrating cloud over the town's ability to move forward, because you have to keep in reserve some money, one, to pay legal bills, which cost the town about $5,000 a month just to keep these fights going. Secondly, if we were to lose any of these, it would cost the town several $100,000 that they would be forced to pay to these taxpayers. Two of these cases are scheduled to be heard before the State Board of Assessment review. My hope is that at least the Madison paper one would be heard before town meeting, but right now it doesn't look like it's going to be scheduled before June. So that's where we are with those items.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's continue on with Julie.
So everybody has the same sheet of paper in front of them, Julie.
I don't know if I have that sheet of paper.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, thanks. There are a whole lot of increases. We're gonna come over here instead of talking to the back of your head. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but the biggest increase is in salary. It's not mine. It's minimum wage changes. And a combination of that and the fact that Tammy caught a bookkeeping mistake that had the two assistant librarians working 360 hours a year, and they actually work 780 hours a year. So it's a corrected figure. Let's take a look. The only other things that I actually have any changes in, office supplies, because all of our supplies, whether it's for the office or for cleaning and maintaining the building, was an increase of 200 that I had asked for. Fuel, if it changes, we use about 3,000 gallons of fuel a year. Typically a year, if it's warmer, we don't, it's colder, we use more. If there's a 20 or 30 cent change in the guaranteed price, that's the difference. And there's a $500 increase in janitorial, but a $500 decrease in software support. Software support we pay to use the circulation and card catalog system that the school uses. And years ago, because we didn't have to pay $20,000 to set it up, we agreed to pay a higher amount of that software support. But in the last few years, we've had to look and look and look and try to find a few more places, take a few more $100 out of it. So I went back down to the 1,000 that we should have been paying instead of the 1,500, and added another 500 in because we'd like to add an extra janitorial hour. Right now, we have Bobby Bishop who does janitorial and maintenance. He is scheduled for 6 hours a week. We're open 6 days, 48 and a half hours. So he cleans Friday morning and doesn't come back to clean again until Tuesday morning. So that's why we'd like to add an extra hour on Monday morning because it's a busy place. The only other thing that I had that I wanted to just kind of pass out, and I have extras in case anybody from the advisory board isn't here and if they want one. It's a listing of the history of the grants that we've gotten from 2006 to 2017. The stipends that we get from other towns every year that offset our budget, and the anticipated income that we get through copies and fines. Do you want copies? Does anybody here want one? Every year we turn into the town office about $2,000 between copies and fines. We have about $7,700 from other towns. Shirley, did you want one? Or are you okay? So that's almost $10,000 off the top of whatever budget total we get. That actually gets paid indirectly from somebody besides the taxpayers. But, and we've hit, in the last 11 years, I've written more grants than this, but we've been awarded over $77,000 in grants. And that's done everything from window replacement, computers, lighting, ceilings, insulation, foundation repairs, summer programs. So, trying to find as much money someplace else as we can, but we still need a little bit.
So as the board can see, from the 2018 budget of 109,425, Julie's recommended budget of 114,640 is about a $5,000 increase.
So the difference with yours is just what you're recommending is different.
What I'm recommending really are just notes at this point.
Okay.
We're not ready for discussion. I wanted to make sure the department has that.
Any questions for Julie?
Any questions for me? I think the two changes that Tim had made was, I'm asking for 200 more in office supplies, and he had deducted that, and I asked for 1,000 more in heat, and he put 500. Almost everything else, I think it's $3,400 of the 5,000 is related to minimum wage and correction of hours worked.
Thank you.
I'm most concerned about heating a building for a head librarian that wears shorts 11 months out of the year.
Hey, imagine if I was cold. Imagine if I was a little old meme that had to wear my sweater all the time. It'd be twice that.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Next one on the list is Don French for the fire department. And I'll point out right at the bottom the difference between the current budget of $101,155 and the proposed budget of $103,430 is just over $2,000. And again, a good portion of that comes from pay and other costs associated with personnel.
Don, you did such a good job the other night. You're back again.
Yeah, the only thing that I actually went up on was, I went from $100 to $300 on mowing. They had the mowing and the plowing together, it was $600, so I just moved them around a little bit. It's gonna be $300 for mowing, and the plowing went down to $400, so it's a total of $800. A difference of a couple $100 there. The only other thing, other than capital, is I went up on my public relations from 400 to 900. I'd like to put on a, well, I shouldn't say, I'd like to, every year we put on a fireman banquet for our employees, and I'd like to have that come out of my budget instead of out of the Madison Association budget, which we don't have a lot of money in. And a couple things for capital. Engine 74, our old tanker out to Company 2, needs new tires. The tires on it are 1994 tires. It's around $3,500 to replace those. And a couple entrance doors, around $500, so an increase of about $3,900 in capital. All the other trucks are up to snuff on everything, the new tires. I can't think of anything else that I'd need to do any more capital with, and nothing else in the budget to increase.
Any questions for Don? Oh, seeing none, thank you, Don.
Yep.
Highway.
All right, for the highway budget, Glenn and Jeff and Tammy and I sat down and talked about several different things, and so I'll let Glenn explain, but the primary differences, I think, are in asking for a replacement of the part-time position that was eliminated a couple of years ago, and some special projects money, but I'll let Glenn take it from there.
Over the years, we've been cut through the payroll, and we got rid of that 20-hour week position. And last March, we had a guy get done. Anyone with a CDL now can very easily go get a full-time job with benefits. The only ones who really want these seasonal jobs seem to be people who are retired or people who are self-employed that can't draw unemployment, and someone who's retired that has a pension and benefits, and they're not concerned about benefits. And we really need a truck driver, equipment operator. Just someone who can only drive a truck doesn't really help us that much. One guy got done last March. We had a truck that was parked. There was quite a workload put on the rest of us. We got through it, but we really don't want to go through it again. The new guy, his training started at midnight on Thanksgiving. Him and another guy went, and that was his training. We just felt it was a little bit pushing it just a little bit too much to be training a guy in those circumstances at night. And we just don't have anyone who can walk in and get in a plow truck. We were lucky to find this guy. He does a good job. He's plowed before, so it really wasn't a big issue. But if flu went through that garage, why there would be some streets that probably wouldn't get plowed. Because anyone with a CDL, they can easily get a job. And it's not just with us, it's with every highway department, the DOT, and even all your trucking companies are having a bigger problem to find people. So that's why we put that 20-hour week position back in. Hopefully we could get someone in and get them trained and let them learn the streets and what they have to do. And that's the only reason it's in there. We didn't, the guy who does the mowing, he's not gonna do it this summer, but we had to leave the money in there because even if we rent a machine, we'll still have to furnish the operator. That trackless that has that boom flail on it, the flail really isn't heavy enough for what we asked for. And that machine is a sidewalk plow that's 11 years old, and we kind of thought it'd be nice to save it for sidewalks so you don't have to spend another $100,000 for a machine with a boom on it. So that's basically the increases in the budget. It's about where we're at. All the other lines seem to work. So special projects, that's kind of what we have, and what comes up. If we don't have the money to do it, we don't. But
So that 20 hours you're asking to add,
yeah,
that goes with the other and makes it a 40-hour job?
No.
Or just 20, you're asking
There
one more
used to be
person?
another person up at the garage,
Because you got the sidewalk guy,
Yeah,
and then he's seasonal, 20 hours, right?
yeah.
And you got the plow driver that you just added, that's 20 hours.
No, that's seasonal, full-time.
So seasonal full-time is from November through April.
Okay, so that's
And they
full-time.
work 40 hours a week,
Okay.
just during those months of the year.
All right.
They're both extra plow drivers and sidewalk plow. So that's those two positions. I think what Glenn is talking about is to add a 20-hour position to that seasonal group.
Because after everybody's been, usually after it storms, try to get some sleep, then we come in and haul snow at midnight. And everybody hauls snow right now. There is nobody on duty the following day to do follow-up, or if it's drifting, there's nobody to do that. That has to be the on-call guy. And this has to be people, when they get a phone call at 2:30 in the morning, you want them in the garage, climbing in the truck at 3 o'clock to make it work. A lot of people just don't want to do that.
All right, any questions for Glenn?
Did everybody understand the implication of the mowing? That's on the second page, third from the bottom. As you can see, we've not allocated any money toward mowing because we've used our trackless machine to mow and we've used our person to mow. So what Glenn is recommending is that we rent a machine for 2 weeks, is that right?
Yes, this would be more of a large farm tractor with a heavier boom on it. Something that is made to do that heavy work.
But it would still be operated by one of our operators.
Yeah. A lot of the things with a trackless is when that engine runs hot, and you have all that dust around it, it's pretty hard on the machine.
And 2 spots down from that where it says 3044 special projects, as you can see, we budgeted $2,500, but year-to-date, we've spent $22,000 out of that line. We've traditionally, the last couple of years, have funded this line out of any carryover that's left over in the highway department. The difference is now Glenn is recommending that instead of relying on carryover, we budget $15,000 for that account. So that would be different, raising it from taxation as proposed here, as opposed to waiting to see if there's any money left over to carry forward.
All right, any other questions for Glenn? Okay, how about the capital?
Yep. So this sheet here is where we are now looking at capital expenses. It's too confusing to try to do them in Trio, so we kind of created our own spreadsheet here. So again, I'll let Glenn talk about this. The first one is a $55,000 request for a highway purchase. And I believe what Glenn is working toward is to try to piece together a couple of different sources of funding for a new plow truck. And I'll let Glenn take it over.
How much did you have set aside in TIP?
So right now, we have $30,000 from the current budget year in TIP for that. And we have $20,000 in our current, actually $28,000 in our current carry forward of capital. So there's about $58,000 that we have on hand right now. If you were to add $55,000 more from taxation and match that $55,000 with TIF in the next budget, that would bring you up to almost $170,000.
That's right in the ballpark for a new single axle plow truck. The reason I put it in was the one that would be replaced would be the 95. The 95 runs fine, but when you try to get parts for that, they just tell you everything is obsolete. The junkyards don't even have parts for it because they don't sell that money and they get rid of it.
Prior to the meeting, Glenn passed out this list of capital equipment that he has. So when he's referring to replacing a truck, he's referring to truck number 8, which is the 95 Ford dump truck. And that is the oldest plow truck that the town currently has. And the last time the town bought a new plow truck was 2008,
Yes.
so 10 years ago.
Solon had an 08 and they got rid of it. They had so much trouble with it. I think we have finally solved most of the problems with that truck, but it's gone through about one radiator every 10,000 miles until we had a radiator built for it. And those are $3,000 radiators.
Is there any questions on that capital purchase? So the next list there are the roads that they're recommending to be paved this year. And Jeff and Glenn and I have ridden around and done a survey and plugged that information into their road surface management program, which brings up roads in order of priority.
In order of priority on you.
Not in order of priority, but this group would be the ones that would be next on the priority list.
Yep. So what's our plan for these roads, Glenn?
If you look over on the, under other, you'll see shim and overlay.
Where are you looking? We're on this sheet, then, where are you in?
He's,
Oh, I'm on this one.
Who's on the
Oh.
road surface management?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't make that available to everybody.
Okay, so like Colby Bryant Road, what are you talking there?
Shim and an 1.5 overlay. Garden Street, an 1.5 overlay. Jones Street would be shim, 1.5 overlay. Kennebec Street overlay. Pinewood Drive, shim and 1.5 overlay. Preble Avenue, shim, 1.5 overlay. And the second section of River Road would be, that would be shim and overlay also.
So I'll just add in, you don't see River Road and Kennebec on this list because those would be under the TIF budget.
South Solon Meeting House Road would be tied in with Solon's paving program.
Now you shim and,
Yeah, shim and overlay. Western Avenue down over the hill would be shim and 1.5 overlay. That's so bad it's either gotta be fixed or turned back to gravel. It's in a hill and we hate to have it be gravel.
So help us understand where you're at on Weston.
If you go up for the last house on the hill and go down around the curve, it's that section.
Any gravel down below then?
It was hot topped quite a while ago, down over the hill, down to that culvert,
Oh, yeah.
and then it's dirt from there on.
So how many feet that from where it's dirt to, what are you looking to fix there?
It's 0.15 of a mile. And 700 or 800 feet.
and what about Rennie's parking lot?
That would be that section, if you go in by the Legion, you go straight in, it'll be that section on the left. That's where most of your people walk, and that's the roughest section.
Well, that's the same type of thing, a shim and an 1.5 inch.
Yes.
Glenn has provided me with estimates for a half of Rennie's parking lot, this parking lot out here at Old Point, the fire station parking lot in East Madison, and down by the basketball courts behind the town office. So we have quotes. They didn't recommend that the town do all those, but he's gotten quotes, so we can provide a general idea if anybody asks. So any other questions about roads?
Any other questions?
In the remainder of the capital budget, we're toying with the idea of putting in money for a new copier. We're 8 years into a 5-year copier, so we keep nursing it along. It's doing good until you really need to do something important. Julie, I apologize, did you have put $1,000 in for library capital? I can't
Yes,
recall.
we talked about that, Tammy and I certainly talked about it, I don't know how much you and I did. The handicap ramp, what was built in 1984, it's concrete, it works. The railing rusts out every year where the railing attaches to the handicap ramp. It seems really steep. Every spring, Glenn comes over and checks it, and there's a place where it leaves the ground, and now it's up on posts, and one part of it subsides, so there's like a 2-inch lip, so anybody in a wheelchair can't get up the handicap ramp by themselves. And it seems really steep, and I think that the slope in the last 35 years has been changed from, if I did my reading correctly, 1 to 20 to 1 to 12, so for every 4 feet, instead of for every 5 feet, a foot drop, if that's, I'm an English major, I'm just looking at the numbers. If you're in the kids' room and you look out the window, you can see underneath the ramp, and it's starting to crack underneath. So, it's nothing that we're going to fix this year. It's probably not even anything we're gonna be able to afford to fix in 5 years, but at a certain point, in order to be ADA compliant, we're going to have a functioning ramp, and if and when something happens to that, I'd like to start now and put a little bit in. I did do a little bit of research on grants. The Christopher Reeve grant page has a grant for automatic doors, because one of the problems with this ramp is when you get to the top of the ramp, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't get the door open, because it opens out as it has to for a public building. There's no automatic, there's no place to press a button and have the door open. I'd like to have eventually some designated handicap parking spaces on that side of the building as well, near the ramp. We have people who use Wi-Fi. If nothing else, we're going to have to put some signs up that say 15-minute parking here to corner, because we have people who park in front of the walkway for an hour to use Wi-Fi in their car and get ticked off, and we go out and say, can you please move forward? You know, because we have people who want to come into the building. It'd be nice to, on the other side, to have a couple of designated parking spaces. So I called Jeff Lloyd just for some ballpark figures. I will try to get as much, if not all of it, paid for through grants, but we've had really good luck, as you can tell from that sheet from the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation. We can apply every 2 years. They give out a lot of money. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, but if we don't get it, then it would be nice to try to start building a little bit of a fund that we can keep adding to. That's why I had asked for that 1,000, just to have a starting point.
And Don mentioned in his report, $4,000 he's recommending in capital will go towards tire replacement and working on some doors. Are those doors in company 1 or company 2?
2.
Okay. And so that makes up that capital recommendation, $333,000. I have a question for you.
Thank you.
Julie, Mr. Vinziano has a question for you.
So you're telling me that going up that ramp in a wheelchair, and the person gets to the top of that thing,
You can't get the door open yourself.
all right, so how are we gonna go about getting that door open myself?
Well,
Is it, you have, I mean, should we instruct Tim to get a look at that and see what we can do to get that to a point where, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that somebody can't come there and access that with a wheelchair.
well, it is, it is.
Do they have a bell they can ring that you can come open the door?
We don't.
It seems like a simple solution.
Well, that is a simple solution, but where the ramp is, what's that?
But then the end of the door's coming up.
Yeah.
We didn't collude either.
Oh, sure,
Can I weigh in on this a little bit?
sure.
In order to be ADA compliant, you're supposed to have at least a minimum of a 5-foot platform in front of your door with a minimum of 18 inches, I believe, to the left of the door, whichever way it opens, left or right of the door, which way it opens. And she was right, to make it code compliant, it needs to be 1 in 20.
And I think that when the ramp was built, it was probably compliant,
Right.
but that was 34 years ago, 34, 35 years ago. I wasn't working there, just so you two know.
Too young, are you kidding?
Well, I think that we need to look into this and get it to a point where we can get people in there without
Right.
having.
I mean, obviously, most
Ring a
people
doorbell.
have a cell phone if they're coming. Also, when this ramp was installed, we were looking at wheelchairs that were wheeled, either a person was wheeling themselves or somebody was pushing behind. There's no such thing as a motorized wheelchair or a motorized cart, which is even more difficult to reach ahead of. We have people in town who use motorized carts, and the way that it's set up, there's a whole little fender on the front. We're there on the main floor. Most people have their cell phones. They call, say, hey, I'm at the door. We go and you know, let them in the building. It's a 112-year-old building. It is only ADA compliant to get into the building. And you can get from that far door to the main desk. Anywhere else in the building, we will go and get what you need because it's 112 years old. It's not like we have an elevator or, you put that in it, you know.
Well, and I'm just thinking that one of these days, we're gonna have somebody come to the door and not get in, and they're gonna cause a ruckus that
Right,
that we're
right.
probably gonna be in a lot of trouble for.
Well, and then it's at least a 15-foot drop from the roof line to the ramp, which is, that used to be a window years ago before they put it in. So when the snow falls off the roof, it falls in front of the door. We have Bobby come and chip away the ice, and when you chip away ice on concrete, the concrete goes away. It's patched it every spring. You know, this is something we've dealt with for a while. So, it needs to be replaced. I understand it's very expensive. And, you know, when I get some actual concrete numbers, then I will start sending out some grant requests. If we get a bunch of money, we'll all be happy and we'll get it done. It's just, now, you know, it has to have a platform. It's supposed to be wide enough. I think it has to be at least 3 feet wide, but it has to be wide enough so you can get the door open. I think it should be where the platform is, I think we should actually have a roof, some sort of covering, because then if you have a door, an automatic door, you can build the installation into the covering and the posts, and they can be that far away from the door. Press that, and the door opens. But it's, you know, they're all of a piece. It's the ramp, then it's the door, then it's the parking. All of those things need to be addressed.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions for Julie or Glenn or Tim on the capital accounts?
Last year, refresh my memory, Tim, when 585,000 came in from the state, the school rationale for keeping that was they had just given us 700,000 out of their surplus. Is that correct? At least that's what they tell me every time I harass them about it.
So, and I can get you the documentation on this because they do a good job recording this in their audits. So, 2 years ago, they gave, okay, so typically every year they put $500,000 from reserves toward the budget. And generally, they don't spend it, so they always have that 500 to give. Going back 3 budgets now, they put 500,000 plus another $640,000, so maybe 700, that's where that number's coming from, out of their general fund. They put that towards the budget, so there would be no increase to the taxpayer. The year after that, the state awarded the town, through the school budget formula, $585,000.
After everything's over.
After everything was over. And they said, we're gonna hold that till the next budget cycle, which is the budget cycle we're in right now. So they've applied that 585 to what that we're paying the school right now. The tricky part is, the confusing part is, the state, after they finalized their budget, if you recall, last July, there was a shutdown on July 4th weekend because the state hadn't passed the budget. Well, when they came back to work and passed that budget, it included more money for education. The way it worked out is MSAD 59 got about $300,000 more dollars. The stipulation from the legislature was half of that had to go to offset taxes. So the school board did that, and they passed that half amount through to offset taxes. So what they're getting this year is what they're getting. I can't foresee in any of the legislature any more money coming to Madison for aid to education.
Any carryover in any of these accounts that can help us?
Even
I'm
though
searching for something.
even though it seems like we're at the end of the budget year, we're only 2/3 through. We still have 4 months to go. Oil prices aren't exceedingly low. Gas and diesel prices aren't exceedingly low. Those are usually the areas where you have a little cushion. We don't really have a lot of cushion. Overtime, highways used a lot of overtime, a lot of diesel. What?
Just Thursday, Jeff and I are going, there is this, another alternative to shimming and paving is a lot of your smaller towns, they've done chip seal where they come in and spread asphalt and then they come in with a fine stone, and this is kind of old school, we're a little leery about it, but we're gonna go and look at it. This would be about half the price of paving. They also have a cold mix, which is like more difficult to work with, but that's a lot cheaper than, or some cheaper than your hot mix. So that's a couple of options that we'll be looking at, but right now we're a little leery of them.
All right, so any other questions? We're gonna end our discussion here, I believe.
Well, one of the things I was hoping that the board would be able to provide to me and the department heads is kind of a gauge, a direction. I know no one's excited about the mill rate going up another 1.5, but we're looking at a 6% non-capital increase. Is the board comfortable with that, or are they going to direct us to come back with different numbers? So that's what I'm looking for.
Any comments? Mr. Moody?
I'm just wondering how we're gonna justify to the people out here that their mill rate's gonna go up another 1.5. That's tough. And there's gonna be a lot of people that just aren't gonna be able to handle that.
Not to keep piling on bad news, but the other part is there's not a further increase in the homestead exemption. And that increase over the last couple of years has kind of cushioned the tax bill to the average consumer. So even though our mill rate went up, if you're a homeowner, your tax bill might have gone down a few dollars. That won't happen this year.
Will it return to, say, the year before's tax?
It'll stay even with the homestead exemption will stay even, that won't go away.
I
But
mean,
we-
what people were paying like 2 years ago before the homestead exemption went up, 5,000, then another 5,000.
Now, because you're changing the mill rate's not consistent with that reduction in homestead.
My major concern is the court cases we have right now regarding the abatements. I was in hopes that we were going to be plus or minus 2% increase across the board, not this high. Because we have some real risk out there of some significant dollars that we could have to pay back. I'm hoping we won't, but it's not our decision, it's someone else's decision on how that's going to be handled. I know the people at the town, in the town office and the road crew, they've done a marvelous job over the last number of years of doing without to get the budget down as low as we did. Unfortunately, we're not getting a lot of help because everybody else wants us to pay more, whether it's the school or the sanitary district, or the water district, or what.
I'm not the sanitary.
Yeah, well, you sure sounded it that night, man. It hurt my hand.
My shoe. Serves you right.
Those other $5 grand.
I was in hopes it was going to be less, Tim, with the significant issues we've got before us. That's me speaking. Where we're headed, I told this to Tim today on the phone. The gentleman that owns the old Meadows apartment complex out on Park Street just purchased an identical set of buildings in Pittsfield. And when he comes in with the advisory board at that last hearing, he's going to bring in his numbers at what it cost him for sanitary, water, and property taxes in Pittsfield compared to what the town of Madison is charging. Same number of units, same everything. He says, how do you ever, you talk about economic development, you talk about the town growing. How is the town ever going to grow when there's towns around us that are so much less money to move into? And this is the thing I keep preaching all of the time, is what is it going to do to the value of our homes? If we pop that mill rate out potentially higher than 25, I can see it coming. There's so many communities out there that are just a better buy for people. So our values of our property keep going down. And one of the things I didn't see in here, what are you planning on for assessing for revaluation? Nothing next year?
Talked to Shirley about that. Since we proposed to do it pseudo in-house and do it in stages, I would recommend utilizing money that the town's already set aside to start, rather than raise more from taxation.
I hate to say that we've got to do one more year of not spending a lot of money. But after this year, we should know what's out there in front of us on these abatements. So that's what I'd encourage people to do. Now, you guys know better than I do. Will Preble Avenue go another year? Will some of these big road projects go another year? You guys can get together and talk about that, but, we're gonna be up to, what do you say, 24 now? 23.
If it goes up another 1.5, that'll take it from 21 to 0.5 to 23.
And we still don't know what's going to come out of the county, actually come out of the county and come out of the school.
Right.
We were in hopes, we sat around and said, okay, once we get through that 3 years and they recognize our evaluation, all of this windfall of money was going to come back from the school that was going to help us. And we haven't seen anything.
Part of that, and you can't put an easy answer to it, but part of that is during that 4-year period, our school enrollment has gone from over 725 to 630. So every time you lose a student, you lose state funding. So if our student count had stayed above 720, we would have more dollars to deal with. But that's kind of the perfect storm, is you have this whole valuation problem and a declining enrollment at the same time.
But we're the only, we're the town ourselves, we don't have Athens students, we don't
No.
have Stock students
That,
and, you know, to count on.
when we had all those, our enrollment was over 1,000.
Yeah.
So that's just Madison compared to Madison. That's not losing any other towns. So we've gone from 700 to 600.
And I expect that will keep going down.
They gained a little bit this year. They gained 10 students overall this year.
That's total enrollment, K through 12?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So-
Yeah.
So where are we gonna,
Figure that out per student.
are we gonna give direction here, or we want the town manager to come back with other things, or, I mean,
Have we meditated on this for a while?
yeah, we're gonna meet again in April, so I mean, we'll have a better idea of if there's any carryover.
I would, not really, but
Hopefully we will.
carryover, the carryover numbers usually come in June, because that's when you really have the good idea of what you've spent. The next two selectmen's meetings in March, I plan to give the selectmen updated numbers after we've talked and looked at other options and looked at certain things. But really, you've only got 5 weeks, because April 4th, you've got to finalize a budget with the budget committee to take to town meeting. So you can ruminate, but just don't do too long.
Can I just make a statement?
Yes.
As a person who lives in the town, I think the most frustrating part of all of this for the town budget is because we only have access to 20% of the taxes. So it feels like we cut and cut and cut, but we only have access to 20% of the taxes anyway. So how big are these cuts? How much influence is that gonna make in the total budget if 80% of the taxes go to county and school? I mean, I know we have to be as frugal as we can be, because it all comes back to the people who live here paying the bills. But the town budget is less than 20% of the total, the municipal budget is less than 20% of the total budget. That's what's frustrating when I'm looking at the budget trying to cut, I'm thinking, I'm cutting $200. What is this doing compared to something that's millions? I'm trying, but I can only do so much with the small budget that I have.
And I know where you're coming from, and at the same time, you're talking about this 20%, and we're sitting here with that 20%. And we're supposed to make these numbers mesh.
Right.
We're supposed to not let the mill rate go up.
Right.
You know, there's just so much you can do with 20%. You know, I wish the burden was spread out a little bit better. And maybe we'd get a little bit more consideration towards the you know, the mill rate. But unfortunately, it isn't, and when the taxes go up, us that said here, with that 20%, we take the heat.
Right, I totally agree.
And the rest of them, with their 80%, just continue on.
Alright, so we'll bring this back.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So may I ask a question? How do you deal with twisting the arm of the county people to say, excuse me, we can't afford this? How do you make them work as hard as you do to try to keep the budget low?
Well, we have representatives on the budget committee, you have a county commissioner, a county commissioner that represents Madison, those people that you can talk to. I mean, we have,
But I don't think people, I'm sure it's posted, but I don't think the average person is aware when the budget hearings are and they don't meet for coffee and get fired up about that like they do about town meeting. I don't know why, but that just seems to be the case.
I don't know, but you gotta, do you want it, I mean, Tim has all that information if you wanna get that from him. I mean,
The county budget has a budget committee made up of representatives from the areas.
I get that, I understand how it
They,
works.
they meet next Wednesday,
Right,
so that's their first meeting.
right, I understand. What I'm trying to say is how do you get townspeople fired up enough to do something?
Well,
You need a PR person, and don't look at me.
all right,
But keep in mind, what Tim said a few moments ago, we're not getting the money from the state
Right.
for the school, because the school enrollment has gone down, but the price to run the school is the same or higher. So that's where our fertile ground is, and that's where people need to get excited. Unless, but, I'm saying that, we still don't know for sure. They might come down and say, we've got 700,000 for you. And if they did that,
they haven't really
then we're
started.
okay.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I called him on Friday to get more information on county and school, because we are 20%. Let's get a clear view of what the other 80 is going to do, if you can. And while Mr. Elias is thinking, maybe you can get some information around where these other people are going to be. And
we've also, in the past, looking at what the mill rate's gonna be, we've also been wrong before. And we've also been way off the base, this far out, guessing what we're gonna have in August. I mean, it is not necessarily always correct. So, Mr. Elias. A lot of assumptions are being made.
Tim, is the county in real time, the state's out 3 years, but is the county year to year on our assessment? And what
So
they charge us?
the county uses the state's assessment.
So they're 3
so-
years out.
So, but what the county is using right now to assess us our portion is that 350 million. We've caught up with the county 2 years ago, and we caught up with the school this year. So we have no more phantom valuations out there that's affecting revenue.
I find it hard to believe that in 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we was 500 million, 506 or whatever it was. And now we're at 350, we should be less than that, shouldn't we?
Our valuation, no, we've worked hard to keep it there. You lost $180 million,
Yeah, but the lower we go, the more they kick in.
not necessarily.
No.
There's a very complicated formula out there that does not work in municipalities' favor.
Yeah, we can't be too simple.
All right, we'll close that and see where we go in April. All right, selectmen's concerns, Mr. Moody,
No, I think we've got enough.
Mr. Elias.
Me too.
One other comment. Keep in mind, it wasn't too many years, but my first year on this board, we were in hopes that we were going to come in with a mill rate under 16. I was hoping for 15.5. And here we're sitting here looking at 23 or 24 or wherever this went on in, but that's what's happened. And valuation on your homes have basically stayed the same other than the homestead exemption. So it really is a perfect storm that's hit us.
Mr. Duchamp.
To piggyback on your comment, when we were talking about a 15.5 mill rate, we were also talking about a budget, a town budget that was approaching $3.7 million. Now the town budget is $2.3 million and the mill rate is significantly high.
Yeah, can you imagine what it had been if we stayed at 3.7?
I think on that same subject, I think that it doesn't matter whether it's in this room here talking about the town budget or whether it's the county talking about the county budget. And the county budget's $890,000, so we have 2.3 here, 890,000 there, and we're talking about raising $7 or $8 million. Well, there's the, where's the big number coming from? And that's everybody's gotta be focused on where we can, look for opportunities to save, particularly with declining enrollments. I think that the school numbers stayed about the same for a number of years, and the numbers of kids have gone down, and I just don't understand how that happens, but the state says they can pay less, but the local taxpayer pays the same, so that's my comment.
All right, I have nothing. Citizens' concerns, any? All right, looking for a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matter pursuant to 1 MRSA 405-6A, the town manager evaluation. Motion and a second to go into executive session. Discuss a personnel matter. All those in favor? All in favor, motion carries. Executive session, 7:59.
Thank you, everyone.